Leon Costello, the athletic director at Montana State University, is the next athletic director on higher ed athletics. Incredibly excited to bring this conversation to you. We start the conversation about just how difficult is it to run a successful athletic department right now, especially at the FCS level. But hey, they are the reigning champions in football, the FCS playoff champion Bobcats. I asked Leon, what does that do for your institution? Really, what can you get more people in the stands? Can it be an economic engine? Do you get more revenue? What's the expectation for the next year? Then that kind of turns into this conversation about scheduling, about why will we see less FBS games on purpose from Montana State. And I can't have a conversation right now with the athletic director at Montana State without talking about the trickle-down effect of North Dakota State joining an FBS conference. So, of course, I ask him, and he gives a real answer, one that really I didn't think about the answer until he said it. And so this conversation just really goes a lot of different directions. There's always a coaching hire question in there that you can tell this guy's been an athletic director for a decade at a high level. And you can just tell why I think so highly of Leon Costello after you get done watching or listening to this conversation. So thanks for tuning in. Make sure you share it with a colleague. Leon, I know you all make it look easy winning a football national championship, and but I'm just curious, like, how much more difficult is it in this day and age to run a successful athletic department at the FCS level specifically? Because I try to have different people on from different subdivisions within D1. I'm just kind of curious what it's like there versus, obviously a lot changed in the decade since you've been there, but how difficult is it right now?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, if it looks easy, I can tell you that it's not. I can tell you it's like a duck sitting on water where, we hope the outside and what people see, is kind of calm, but underneath we're paddling like crazy. And, it's interesting time. And I think since COVID and now through all the changing legislation, we've had to become very flexible and very malleable. A lot of things are changing. The way we used to do things are not the same. I can tell you, when I first got here in 2016, we were just talking about, being in Bozeman and how beautiful it is here, this part of the country. We would always say we would get 90% of the student athletes that we recruited if we could get them to come to campus. Once they got off the plane, they went through our beautiful airport, they come to campus and they see all the great things that are happening. 90% of the time, we felt really good about landing that recruit. Well, that's just not the case anymore, because a lot of the traditional things that you would recruit to are secondary, because a lot of times the first thing that comes out of a student athlete's mouth or a representative's mouth is how much. Right? It's all about money now. And so the landscape for us has completely changed, and I can say it's changed in recruiting, but it's also changed in retention for that same reason, where, when we were recruiting with the same resources with, a full scholarship or a full scholarship plus cost of attendance, and maybe you did a little bit of Alston funding, those things, if you had a good experience at a place, you're probably going to stay. Well, those things are probably not the same anymore. And but so, we try to do the best that we can to make their experience here as good as it possibly can be. We want to surround them, our student athletes, with as much support so they know that they can accomplish the goals that they have here. And if some feel like, they want to go try some different things, more power to them. The way the NCAA is set up and the way the landscape is set up for them to be able to do that, they can do it. But we hope that the relationship with the coach, the support system they have here in place, that hopefully they want to finish their career here. So it's changed a ton. I don't want to say we feel like minor leagues, but sometimes it does feel that way. But we really are focused on making sure that student athlete feels like they can accomplish everything that they want to get out of their college career here at Montana State.
Yeah, well, I mean, your men's basketball team's got, I saw a post on social media, like 100% retention rate with that picture. And I know I worked with Josh Schertz at Indiana State, and so St. Louis is having similar success. They're not quite at 100% retention, but uh, now that we just see graphics of a whole team together after a season, that probably has to make you proud. But also, kudos to your coaching staff. And so, I mean, as difficult as it is, and I'd say that means you're doing something right.
Yeah, and I think that comes down to one is student athletes again feeling like they can achieve their goals while they're here, but really that relationship with the coach, their development, if they feel like they're getting better. Again, going back to that support piece that I talked about, if they feel like they are supported here on campus when it comes to especially those things outside of basketball that the coaches really deal with. If it's a class and they need a tutor or their nutrition needs or whatever it might be, if we can put the right support system around them and they feel good about that experience, there's a higher probability that we're going to be able to keep them. And a lot of times, when teams have success together, it might be a little bit easier to keep more of that team together than just having an individual that's good or that's really shining. And I think we saw that this year where the team really started to come together. It was relatively a younger team, and I think those guys feel like there's more unfinished business that they want to accomplish, and there's more work to do. And again, I feel good about the fact that they feel that they can do that right here at MSU and not have to go somewhere else to fulfill their needs. And so, it doesn't happen very often, but when it does, it needs to be celebrated, especially this day and age.
Yeah, I mean, it stood out to me for sure as I was prepping for this. And, the other thing is fan support. Do you expect winning an FCS national championship in football? I mean, for one, do you even have the capacity to increase your fans based on last year? Or how else does it economically help you all still to win a national championship? Because, that means something. Obviously, FCS playoffs is very well liked and not easy to do. So what is the economic benefit from it that you might all expect to see?
Yeah, look, anytime winning a championship, I think is definitely beneficial for the program, for the department, and for the university. And if you look at all of our social media analytics, we've improved all of those since the championship run. If you look at website visits from people just to Montana State University, those have multiplied exponentially. Applications to the university have risen, and so we have felt kind of the effects of that. When it comes to specifically our fans, one of the great timing things that we've had is we need to expand our stadium. We've been selling out our games, for the past 5 years. The demand for our tickets is there, and we had a feasibility study that we were working on that was ready. That we just finished up here today was the last day that our fans could fill out the survey talking about expanding the stadium. We know that we need more seats in our stadium. Our fans that can't come and can't get a ticket need more access. And so we are doing the kind of the dirty work, the kind of the first steps of being able to see what it is that the fans want in a renovated stadium, what kind of amenities that they want to see, but then how much are they willing to pay for those amenities. And so a renovation is definitely on our minds. We hope we can get at it here very quickly, but I think that's going to have the championship run is going to have a huge impact on the response of those surveys and really response and fundraising when we go out and try to raise money for the stadium. And then you look at it not in capital projects, but if you look at raising money for scholarships and you're raising money for NIL and revenue share that we can share with the student athletes, we've seen a tremendous increase in that. And I can tell you, when it first started, when first NIL started, we had fans, I would say that were maybe a little bit old school, that wanted it to be the way that it was and maybe weren't on board with paying the players and student athletes more than what we could. But I can tell you now, through a championship run and through a couple of years of maybe not keeping a couple of the players that we wanted, or maybe not being able to get a couple of the players we wanted, their perspective has changed. And our education with them on why it's important to basically live in this world, it's why we opted in at the first chance that we could opt into the settlement, because we knew if we wanted to be successful, we needed to live in the world of the house settlement. And now that we've had a kind of a case study for our fans, that they've kind of seen both sides of it, they get the importance and they know the importance. And you mentioned football as far as being able to retain student athletes. We've seen a very similar model in retention with football, even after a championship. We did lose a few, but to be honest, we maintained and retained a vast majority of our student athletes, and we feel really good about how that sets us up for next year. And so, to really kind of encompass your question, yeah, we are feeling the effects of the championship, and I think we're feeling it, from ticket sales to NIL and rev share to donations, and the need to do more because the demand is there from our fans, and we're taking the first steps to be able to get that done.
Another week of higher ed athletics and another partnership announcement with AD Vantage. People are finally figuring out why I partnered with them, why Tanner Stump and his team have created the Moneyball of college athletic departments. Clemson, Louisville, Charlotte, Boise State, Coastal Carolina, North Texas, Missouri State, and Indiana State have all made the decision to partner with AD Vantage. So when you zoom out across the industry, there's definitely no shortage of data, but there is a lack of context with that data. You can see what programs are spending, but not always what they're getting in return. So AD Vantage, they start to connect those dots for you. It's not another expense line. It's a smarter way to deploy the ones you already have. I read you the list of partners. There's probably going to be another one soon. Why not you? Your competitors probably have already talked to them. College athletics is a decision sport. Make the right one and contact AD Vantage. Tell them Travis from Higher Ed Athletics sent you.
Yeah, I watched 3 or 4 of your games this past year, and that fan base, I mean, it is loud and they are passionate. And, it kind of reminds me, prepping this question was when I had Tom Berman on from Wyoming, several years ago. But he mentioned that really Wyoming's athletics was the sports and entertainment of all of Laramie and Wyoming area. You all are the biggest campus, I believe, in Montana and the land grant, and you have obviously you have other good schools in the area, but you are really the sports and entertainment engine of Bozeman and the surrounding area. So I kind of taken this with the fan support. You just talked about consistency, so I'll kind of rearrange it to this. As you're looking at trying to come up with a uniform partner, or you're trying to come up with more corporate sponsors that can kind of help with NIL, the individual support is there. I mean, how are companies responding to this, knowing that you are going to make a run in FCS playoffs probably every year, and you are going to have these opportunities to be showcased? So, I mean, that's gotta help make your job not easy, but maybe less difficult than if you weren't winning.
Yeah, we've seen a great response when it comes to our fans. Again, when it comes to tickets and buying tickets and donations for scholarships and other things, the same can be said for our corporate community as well. I think over the past 5 years, and since we've come out of COVID, we've hit a record in corporate sponsorship revenue each and every year. We have our meetings with Learfield all the time about trying to come up with new inventory because we keep selling out of inventory. And so when you talk about jersey patches, you talk about field logos, the new legislation that is allowing us to maybe grow a little bit more, we have received those very well because we are looking for new opportunities to be able to sell, because there really isn't anything left to sell within our football stadium. And we know that's a driver for our entire athletic department. I talk to our coaches all the time about football and where football is in relation to them. And the nice thing about our coaches is they get the fact that if football's good, it's good for the greater good of our entire department, because as revenue's coming in, if they see a sold out Bobcat Stadium and they see us, winning games in the playoffs, they know that it's going to be positive for them because of the revenue that is driving. And we have seen where, there's a healthy competition between our coaches where they see somebody being good, they want to have that same success as well. So that culture within our coaches right now is really healthy. It's really good. They cheer for each other, but they don't want to be left behind either, right? They want to have some of that same success. But I think it's really interesting how football fits because, they get it. They get it. If we're selling a bunch of tickets, revenue-wise, that's going to come back and be a benefit to them. And so it's a really great thing that's happening. At the end of the day, we try to make sure we balance that as best that we that we can. But the culture here has been great. Like I said, revenues have been good. If you have any ideas on how to increase our inventory so we can go sell some more, I'm all ears because I know Learfield would take the help for sure.
Hey, I'm worried about my own inventory on Higher Ed Athletics. I got paychecks to myself to write. But no, I mean, that's awesome you mentioned the stadium growth. And what's funny is I just keep reading about how people are trying to downsize their stadium to go to, just make it nicer necessarily with premium. You're kind of like, no, we need more butts and seats. And that's a good problem to have, with a consistent football program. And so you talked about that support, or I asked about that support. I've got to ask the question, North Dakota State trickle-down-effect. I mean, are those same corporate sponsors and those same fans? You talked about some of them are traditional, so maybe this is, wanting them to stay. But do you feel like this sense of pressure or excitement that maybe Montana State is next to at least go football only into FBS?
Well, my head's not in the sand, right? I mean, there have been conversations with fans or outside sources surrounding our programs and even other programs within our league. But I would say pressure would be kind of a strong word. I don't think there's any pressure. We feel really good about our relationship with the Big Sky Conference, with where we fit within the Big Sky Conference. I think at the end of the day, I want to ensure that we are in a position where all of our sports can win championships. And we want to set up our programs so they know that they're going to be resourced in a way so that they can win championships. And of course, when you win a national title, some of those things are going to be talked about, and that's okay. To be honest with you, I like it because that means that we have won something or we have accomplished something.
Say it every time. I partner with onrise.care because I care about college athletes. I spent 10 years working in athletic academic support. I know how much importance you have to place on mental health. Think about all the pressures our athletes are facing. Coming out of high school, adjusting to college is enough stress for anybody. Now all of a sudden you throw in the transfer portal. You throw in even more expectations. Just the concern of being an athlete, in season, out of season, making friends, making connections, finishing that degree, staying eligible, actually performing in your sport. All of these are everyday concerns for college athletes. I know you care about your college athletes too. Some of you listening, your department may not be able to afford the support. So that's why I partner with OnRise to make sure you're aware that you can have one call, same day setup, immediate athlete access to licensed clinicians, retired pros, and 24/7 crisis care. It's going to be very affordable for you, less than what you would spend on one full-time employee in-house, no hiring hassles, no initiative fatigue. And let me just say, the passion Kim has for this business is why you have to go to onrise.care. Tell them that Travis from Higher Ed Athletics sent you. Check out their website and see why you can start providing access to mental health for your athletes, because I know how much you care about them.
So at the end of it, I want to make sure that we are positioning ourselves to be, the best possible athletic department we can be, that our programs are set up for success. And, the difference between us and NDSU, I'll go into that maybe just a little bit, is, their football program is housed in a separate conference than the rest of their Olympic sports. if you look at us in the Big Sky, all of our sports are in the same conference. So to make it just a football move for them, again, I don't want to say it was easy. There are plenty of decisions and things that need to be made for that. But to move one sport instead of all of them, like it would be in our case, like I don't want to speak for them, but it's got to be a little bit easier to make that decision than it is to move all of your sports. And so, again, for me, it's all about winning championships and being resourced and equipped to win. And we feel like with our positioning right now in the Big Sky Conference, we're in a great spot to hopefully continue the success that we've seen and continue to build on that.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's not an easy thing to communicate to a fan base either. Is, well, like they might not even know that their football team is at North Dakota State is in a different conference, and so those like logistical and obligations of your contract with like the Big Sky or whatever that, and it takes an invitation, right? And so people might be like, hey, let's wait, see how it goes in North Dakota State. And some people would argue like just stay now and keep dominating for a while, right? So some people might not want to change.
Yeah, and you said it. You used a better word than I did. I used old school. You used traditionalist. I like that word a little bit better. But yeah, I mean, we have a lot of fans that want to play in the FCS playoffs. They love the FCS playoff structure. They love the way it is. I've heard a lot of comments about why make a jump up and go play in a meaningless bowl? And I'm like, well, if you get invited to a bowl, it's not meaningless, but I totally understand where they're coming from, because that playoff system is you're competing for a championship, and that's ultimately what they want to do. And so I totally understand where they are. And look, if you look at the landscape right now and what I think there was an article that just came out today about an autonomous subdivision. There are things that are going to continue to happen in the next 4 to 5 to 6 years. There are going to be more things that happen, more realignment. And so again, I go back to let's make sure that we are really, really good and make sure that we are set up for success no matter where we are, because then I think we're going to be wanted wherever that is, and wherever we're wanted and wherever we are, we're going to be able to have success, which is ultimately what our fans want to see.
So Cincinnati really had this playbook. Like everyone thinks they were an overnight success for the Big 12. It was like a 10+ year, multiple AD decisions before John Cunningham even got there. You could argue South Florida is doing the same thing right now with their athletic director. They're all preparing for the future by being great in the present. And that sounds like what you're all doing. The final thing I'll say about this potential move that maybe people don't write about is, if you get to a bowl game, cool. But if you're not getting to the CFP and winning multiple games, you're getting a lot less games. I mean, you're end up playing 14, 15 games a year. You might lose 3 games. And your fans, some fans that really love watching Bobcat football, they would lose 2 or 3 games, right? And I don't think that's talked about enough.
No, that's a great point. I take out the COVID year because we didn't play COVID, but we've made the playoffs the last 7 straight years, which has never happened at Montana State. And so the playoffs now have become an expectation, and playing more games at home because of that is kind of become an expectation as well. So the 6 home games a year that we have, sometimes 7, gets multiplied when you're playing those playoff games. And so I agree. It's by not doing it, you're playing a lot less games. And I love the fact that the FCS went to 12 games. Again, it's just more opportunities for student athletes to play the game they love, but for fans to come and watch as well.
Well, that kind of leads me into this. There's also always this time of year, there's going to be talk about CFP as we head into football. But, just a couple weeks ago, people are talking about the expansion of March Madness. And so obviously you all in FCS, that wouldn't affect you for the CFP expansion, but it could in scheduling. March Madness, you could argue it'd be good for you, although I'd say most people would just try to push, major programs, institutions in. But from a scheduling landscape, it's already difficult. And a lot of FCS programs need those. So for example, it can be hard for you to play Oregon one day, maybe if they expand the CFP, or do you think that would actually make it easier for Oregon to schedule? And you all kind of have this luxury of being a top dog in FCS, so maybe it doesn't affect you as much. So feel free to take it of FCS wide if you want, however you want to answer it.
Yeah, I guess I look at it maybe not so much about expansion, but when you're talking about football, looking at what the conferences do within their, as the conferences grow, how many conference games they're going to play within their conference. For us, when we went to 12 games in the FCS, next year will be the first year we'll play 9 conference games. One of the reasons is it's hard to get games where we are within our region. You know, a lot of the FCS teams are east of the Mississippi, and to get teams to travel here is really difficult. And so we thought it just made sense, in order to help us scheduling, to schedule 9 conference games. Where you're starting to see some of the FBS conferences do that as well. And I think that will probably impact scheduling more than maybe expansion will, because it'll just limit the opportunities that there are for those guarantee or buy games for FCS, or even the group of 6 teams that want to play a Power 4 opponent. And so we're watching that very closely. Actually, we're kind of making a shift as well. You know, as we've had success in football, we're going away more from the need to play a game like that, especially for the financial reasons. We would much rather play a full FCS schedule to really help us set ourselves up for the FCS playoffs. And so you're going to see, from a Montana State perspective, you're going to see us probably playing fewer FBS games than what we have in the past. And one goes back to, talking about our fans. Our fans are filling our stadiums. They're buying tickets. We're increasing our revenues. We're not as beholden to the finances that one of those FBS games gave us in the past. We can now generate that on our own here by hosting a home game. And so we're looking at that a little bit more. But I would say for me, and for maybe for the FCS, looking at what conferences are doing, especially at the FBS level, with those 12 games, if more of them move to a 9-game conference schedule, I think that'll have a really big impact on how we schedule in the future.
Yeah, it's just fascinating, everything, and some of these schedules are so far out that, a change for like a cancellation could make it very hard to schedule again in the future. But your strategy sounds interesting, of being able to schedule more FCS. I think people would be surprised to hear maybe play less FBS, because you could argue you get a chance to beat those teams. It makes people even more and you'd be favored in a lot of them, in my opinion.
Well, that too is the problem, right? So when you get to a certain level, they don't want to play you. Yeah, they don't want to play you. I get it. I totally understand it.
Gosh. Yeah, well, I want to kind of switch gears to something that we talk about, a lot of changes in athletic director roles. One thing that is not changing is ADs are still responsible, last time I checked, for hiring head coaches, and can impact your performance as an AD on how they do with those hires. So what is your approach to any head coach hire? You can take it with any sport, or if there's like a philosophy and what you look for. Some people have mentioned things like, I only look at certain division. I only look for head coaches. I only look for assistants that are trying to grow. Like what's kind of the Leon Costello approach?
Well, if there was one, it would be a squiggly line kind of all over, because I really think each opportunity presents an individual opportunity in of itself. I've taken the approach where we've done internal, We've run the search internally with no search firm. We've run searches with a search firm. I've hired assistant coaches. Then I've hired coaches that were head coaches to be the head coach. So it just kind of depends on what the situation you're in is really calling for. And so there really isn't a model, but I can tell you this, that we're always prepared, because as our teams have success, we know that they're going to be looked at for other opportunities. And so you always hear, ADs talk about having the list in their back pocket ready to go if something would happen. And I don't necessarily know if it's a list, but, we and I pay attention to the landscape of what programs are doing well, what coaches are doing well, just in case something like that would happen. And look, we will do everything we can to retain our coaches, especially if they're having success. But we also know that everybody wants to continue to grow in this business. And there are a lot of people, and probably me, I'm probably guilty of this as well early in my career, where I was maybe a little bit afraid of that. I didn't want to lose a coach and have to go on and do a search. But now it's kind of a badge of honor if you lose a coach to a program and they get selected, that somebody actually wanted your coach because of the success that they were having. And so definitely not afraid of that anymore, because it now has happened quite a bit here. I can tell you I'm just more prepared for when that time comes. We want to keep growing with all of our programs. I tell our coaches all the time when we sit down, whether it's an evaluation or through our conversations throughout the week, is I want to continue growing with our programs. We may not have 100% of everything that you want or that other schools or programs have, but as we continue to grow and have success, I want to grow with you. So if we need more rev share, well, let's grow into that. If you need more of a recruiting budget, let's grow into it. If you want to travel a little bit differently, if you want to take a few charter flights, that's fine. Let's grow into that. And as our coaches have success, then that opportunity now becomes more attractive for a coach that's going to replace that current coach. And so I guess I feel a little bit more comfortable in that because of what we've done behind the scenes to make sure the programs are in a position to have success. Again, it's definitely easier to retain a coach than to go out and go find one. And so we will do everything in our power to make sure that we can retain our successful coaches. But when that time comes, you got to make sure that your house is in order so that you can attract the next coach to continue on the success that current one did.
Yeah, and I'd be I'm not going to put you on the spot, but for me to talk to all the ADs and deputies watching, it's why I partner with AD Vantage, Athletic Director Vantage. They have Coach Effect Score. I just love their product. I use it for my AD Insight episodes, and it's really good. You can even evaluate. And so you can evaluate your own coaches. And so what I want to ask next is, naturally we talk about hiring. Okay, well, you just talked about retaining your own head coaches. How do you approach the whole evaluation process for your head coaches? I'm sure you have sport administrators, but at the end of the day, you're probably the one, making the decision on whether it's been that met expectations, succeeded, or failed to meet them.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, we have a formal evaluation process that we have to do every year for our human resource requirements, and we do that. But that's more of just to check a box for the process. I think the evaluation really takes place throughout the year. I pride myself on getting out of my office and going to practices, going to the coaches' offices, sitting down with them, running into them in the hallway, whether it's in between a workout or trip to a fueling station with their student athletes, being out and being active and seeing kind of what they're doing. And I was just at volleyball practice today, and that's a time when coaches really are open because they're sitting there, they're practicing, they're thinking about how to make their team better, and that's when their ideas are really flowing. And to catch them in action and to get some of those ideas is good for me to be out and in the activity that they are in, because I think it's beneficial for everybody. But that process goes on all year, and it doesn't have to be a practice. It can just be they're in their office and I want to sit down and we're just having a conversation about things other than work. It could be family, it could be their golf game, it could be whatever, and naturally that's things start to percolate. And that's where you get some of the real honest conversations that you need to have in order to work together to make the program successful. And so I focus more on what information I can gather throughout the year. I think the formal process at the end of the year, we can say, hey, this is what we did great. This is what we need to work on here. And then here's our roadmap for next year. But I think then you already have all of the information that you need and what the program needs to be successful. And that allows us to work on being able to gain those resources that they need throughout the entire year. And so it's a valuable tool to be able to sit down and have a conversation. But my advice to any of the ADs or deputies listening is that can't happen just once a year. It's got to happen throughout the year.
Yeah, I like you had mentioned we can grow into that, and that's I think that's something everybody can get behind, and that sounds like that's a thematic thing that maybe you repeat or you bring up. I like the way you approach that maybe we can't get it tomorrow, but like we're working towards something. Okay, you want this goal, let's go to work to try and figure it out. So I like that approach too.
Yeah. Well, it's really important when you look at coaches will compare themselves to other programs, right? And they know where other people are, whether it comes to budget or travel or things like that. And, coaches always want to be at the top of all of those. Well, that's not probably financially feasible, right? Financially feasible. You can't do that. But where are your priorities? What is going to make this team in this program successful? And let's focus on that. And as we are able to do that, hopefully we're selling more tickets, we're selling more sponsorships, as we've talked about before, and then maybe there's a few more resources around that we can grow into some of these other aspects that they feel are priorities.
Yeah, that just reminds me. So I spent 10 years in college athletics before. I've been doing the podcast for 6 years, but 10 years, I feel like in compliance, a lot of the things I got was, well, it's such and such school. That's not how we did it. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm sure coaches are like that too with their ADs about resources and gosh, that used to drive me crazy. It was like that was like the compliance meme of what's at school A. That's not how we did it. I was like, all right. So
Yeah.
that's usually when I knew the conversation wasn't going anywhere as well.
That's where information is power, right? So if you have the information in front of you and you know where the schools are and how they're spending their money, and you have that information in front of you during that conversation, you can see like, well, here's actually what's happening. And I see this as well. Let's work on this together so we can put ourselves in a position to where maybe you're not in the bottom half of this category. We're going to get you to the top half of this category, and you work your conversations that way.
Yeah, and I had an AD tell me once, just offline, of like, if I tell my baseball coach, I know what I'm investing in baseball. We're making a choice to invest at that level in baseball. It's not going to be at the top of the conference. It's still important, but when I'm evaluating that coach, then I'm also keeping that perspective that, look, I didn't invest at the top. I can't compare them to the top because I made the choice to invest, in this program right now, because that's what our as an institution's strength is. And so I think having perspective and context around a decision is good too, I imagine.
And that's where that relationship comes in handy, right? If you have a good relationship with your coach, then I think you both are on the same page. You both understand that context. I certainly agree, and it's something that we talk about all the time. If we're not going to give X number, if we're not going to be in the top half in the budget in recruiting, let's say, and they can only make a few trips, well, I totally understand. Maybe why they did a few things this way is because it was a decision that we made together. And I'm not going to hold them accountable for that. We're going to work together, hopefully, to improve everybody's situation.
Well, I have one question after this, but I do want to give you a chance. You kind of mentioned the advice in the coaching question, but I always like just to ask, like, look, you've been an athletic director for like a decade, and at a high level of success as a department and obviously in certain sports. So what would your advice be right now? You've led through COVID, you've led through NIL, the transfer portal, the semi-pro, aspect of things sometimes. What's your advice for aspiring and current ADs that maybe are either looking to make a jump or a different fit, like just some encouragement and advice?
Yeah, for me, it was, figuring out that I needed to trust myself. The old adage of trust your gut. Because I've made a few decisions where I maybe thought were maybe in the best interest of maybe other people, and maybe not myself, and they didn't turn out the way that I wanted them to, or maybe that they should have. I feel like I'm a person that will gather the information that I need. We use a lot of data when we make our decisions. I trust, in my team and my senior leadership team to get me the information that we need. And a lot of times we make decisions together. And I love that because we're all part of the same team. All these decisions are going to affect us all equally. And so being able to work together to make these decisions is great. But you have to be able to trust your gut when you're making that decision. You've done the homework, you've done the research, Make the best decision that you can make for one, the student athletes, your department and the university. One of the things I've talked about a lot, there are three things that I kind of look at when I'm making a decision. And the first is it good for the student athlete? Right? I ask myself this, is it good for the student athlete? If it's not good for the student athlete, well, then why are we even talking about it, right? And so if it's good for the student athlete, then we're going to go to the second one is, can we do this? You talked about compliance. Are there regulations, are there policies that say that we can't do it? And if they're not, if we can do this, then the third one is, can we afford it? And if we can do all three of those things, then why is the decision not yes? And so I look at it, try to simplify it that way, and trust in all the information that I have is the right information. And then I think the decision-making process, it's never easy, but it's easier to be able to make a big decision. And then the second one I would say, especially to the aspiring ADs, is these decisions, the process gets easier as it goes along. If you're a first year, second year sitting in the chair and you've got to make some an HR decision or do things like that, it's really hard when you haven't gone through it and you haven't done it. But as you go through this and as you have kind of the institutional knowledge of your department or even of the college or the university, those decisions, while they're never easy, the process of going through them actually becomes a little bit easier because you have your processes in place. And it just takes a little bit to be comfortable with that. And I certainly learned over my 10 years here at MSU that you got to have a process in place, and then you got to make sure when you make that decision, you're 100% with it and you don't look back. And so I think those would be the main things. Is I never want to make a decision that a day or two later after you sleep on it, you're like, oh man, why did I do that? It should be where I made the decision. Yes, it was hard, but when I look back at the factors and the information I had, that was the right decision to make at the right time.
Well, I want to end this, and it's going to be a fun one. It's got to be in 8 seconds or less. Bobcat Rodeo. Talk to me about what it's like having rodeo as a varsity sport.
It's awesome. I've learned so much about rodeo. That's the culture of our state, having those kids come on into our department. When we took them on, our entire student athlete population loved it. They all support each other. They lead our football team onto the field for all of our football games. They're definitely part of our program. I can tell you this, I've learned a lot. I've even ridden a bull during our spring rodeo. And so yeah, it's been a lot of fun to get to learn and know our student athletes in rodeo. Plus,
is it a living, breathing animal, or did you just have to insert a quarter?
It was a living, breathing animal, but let's just say it wasn't a bull you see on the PBR.
Awesome. Well, Leon, thanks so much for joining me on Higher Ed Athletics. Justin Sell spoke highly of you whenever he was on and off air too. I knew I had to get you on, but you were also making a national championship push, so I didn't want to mess with that back in the fall, and so I had to catch you in the spring. So thanks for taking the time.
Well, I appreciate it, and Justin has been a great mentor of mine, and he's done amazing things at South Dakota State, and now we've become pretty good rivals of each other, especially on the football field, and I think you're going to see that rivalry gain steam for years to come.